Over the past 10 years, we've taken our DIY projects to millions of viewers across the world on YouTube, and we can't wait to start this next build.
Having no background in trades, we have learned everything along the way.
At the last house, we managed to do a full renovation, including extensions, conversions, new roofs, timber framing, and just about everything you can think of in the DIY world. But this project is definitely going to be the project of a lifetime for us. I've given it away, have I?
What you said to Chris. That's fantastic news. We literally found out 5 minutes ago, less than 5 minutes ago, because we've read so much so quickly.
We got it. We got it. We got the plan in. Oh my. So first up, let's give you a bit of background. This is a 50-year-old steel portal frame building and used to be part of a dairy farm. Here you go. I've been waiting a long time to do that. That's called legal demolition now. So you're nearly at floor height, but we're gonna go. It's a 1 block lower, the windowsill.
Oh, okay.
How's that?
It's good, isn't it?
So after that huge hassle of all the planning applications and all that stress and hard work, we finally got to the point where we could break ground. And this is what the first thing to do was. It was to make a bit of a mess. It was to break out the slab, which had too much of a fall on it, too much of a slope for all the drainage, that it wasn't going to be usable for our conversion. So we decided that we would take that up, and I spent my first month on the build working solo by breaking that up, stacking it outside, and it would be what would be recycled into aggregate for other projects in the future. Bizarrely, we also decided to incorporate a swimming pool into the build. It's something that we don't have the budget to carry out anytime soon, but we wanted to get the groundwork done right at the beginning, and while we had the digger in there and the time and the space, we dug a big hole. So after a tough spring working solo on the build, we were so thrilled and thankful to be able to welcome Tom onto the team. Tom's a friend who is also a talented carpenter and fortunately is happy to turn his hand to most things. So for the last year, Tom has been spending 3 days a week helping me on the build and working through all of these sort of head scratching issues, because nothing really is straightforward with this build, as you will have known if you've watched all the videos so far. Now we're working our way through the structure at this point, and there's a lot of the steels which were simply there as gate posts, because this was obviously a functional barn with lots of gates for lots of cows, and those posts were not really needed in the structure of the new build, and they weren't doing anything to support the roof, so it made sense to take them out, and then we could build our stud-work walls between the primary steel columns. But of course, because we want to put a mezzanine and loft spaces in, we needed to do some groundworks to enable us to get some trenches and footings in there. Now our structural engineer, while of course the steel is there and it's already supporting the full roof, there's some structural things we can do to our new frame which will actually complement the existing structure. As we went into June, we were very pleased to see the back of the old asbestos corrugated roofing that had sat on the barn for the duration of its life. And while it had kept the place dry, it was not a material that we wanted to be over our family home. And bizarrely, it was one of the contentious issues throughout our planning applications, was us removing the asbestos roof. The council wanted it almost to be retained and not touched. But on our final full application, we were able to remove that asbestos roof with something that was far better performing thermally, but also far safer for us to have over the house. That also gave us the option to look at the purlins that were up there. There was some sagging that had happened over time, but those timber purlins, while they were suitable for agricultural tolerances, and they were actually deemed acceptable for conversion, we took the opportunity to replace them with a steel Z profile purlin. That was going to give us a flatter roof, and Joe was able to help with the telehandler there. 7 or 8 months pregnant, but still able to sling me up in the air and get all that done on the evenings as we went into the summer. Meanwhile, we were getting started on the block work. We had Morgan, a local brickie, come round, and he started off some of the block work, but we ended up taking over from that as he went off to a new job, and we got everything basically up to DPC, ready for our concrete. And then we were able to hand over to Dave to come and help with the mezzanine. So we've got some fairly substantial steels in here just to help with that roof load and the way we're incorporating it into the footings. So we've got the big beams going in, some extra columns, and that will be what supports our first floor with the bedrooms upstairs. And then the big moment, which was, well, there was some stressful hours prior to this, but the roofing all arrived on site, and these are Kingspan composite 150mm PIR panels, and we got them all delivered. And once they were around into the field, we were able to work with the team to get a crane on site and, well, basically crane them all into place in just under a day. I think the whole lot was on in the first day, leaving the trim and some of the final fixings on day 2. It was one of the more intense period of times since starting the build, but it was great to get that up there and know that we had shade for the rest of the summer. But before we could get back on site, there was another important project, which was, well, delivering another baby. This time it wasn't a DIY delivery, and Rupert, our little boy, was born, and we took a couple of days off before we headed back to the farm and made a plan as we went into autumn. So as September and October came, we thought there's these final jobs that we wanted to get done before we knew winter would hit hard. So we decided to get all of that lawn leveled. We moved around some topsoil, and it just meant that we could get some grass seed down and start sort of having a feel for how that outside area was going to work and let things settle over time. We didn't want to finish the barn and then have just a big dirty building site around us. So it made sense to just spend a couple of days getting some of the prep done and just making things a little bit easier for us in the long run. Now, you know that crazy swimming pool idea that we had? Well, we kind of got a bit carried away with it, and there were certain things that we needed to do while we had access and while the build was at this stage. And one of those things was to pull that concrete slab that I never want to think about again. The hottest day of the year, and we had 10-12 cubic meters of concrete to throw around, just the two of us, and it wasn't fun at all. But what it did give us is a foundation slab, a big thick foundation slab to build our ICF walls on. This is a concept that we had seen other pool builds do, and it seemed to make sense for us. So we're using ICF panels all clicked together in place. Steve came up and helped us on the day, and he'll be back in the future to help us with the pour. It is really far down the priority list, but there's certain things that we just had to get done while we had the space and access. Now, the nice thing about the way we're building is we're almost upside down in terms of having a roof before we have walls, and we're able to work in the dry, which was a big benefit considering September was a bit of a washout. That meant we could start on the drainage, the internal drainage that's going to run under our slab, sort out some of those internal supporting walls, and you can see that blue line of thermoblocks there, which means that we're all isolated from the ground. And then we could start using all of the aggregate that we'd managed to salvage from the barn. So there was a huge amount of nice quarried clean type 1. We had also dug up a huge amount of clean sand from that swimming pool, and we were able to start getting all of that prep work done and bring in a load more sand for sand blinding before our insulation. And we got our levels. It was a bit of hard work, to be honest, getting all this right. It's such a large area, and without big laser beams and things like that, we just had to work through and split it up into zones. But the roller was definitely well worth hiring out. Weather tight by winter, he said. When the rain finally did stop, we could carry on with some of those internal walls. We got those in place, and that was what was going to set our internal floor level. So we wanted to get that final course absolutely bang on the laser, because our polished concrete floor is, well, it's our polished concrete floor. It's our final finished floor level, and there was no going back. So it's not like we've got screed or tile or carpet or anything to forgive our sins. We had to get it right, and we also had to work out our depths, working down from that to allow for our 150 mil of insulation and all that concrete that was going to go on top. So we worked through the building. We tried to just treat each bay as its own little area, and of course when we did the concrete pour itself, which you'll see in a minute, it was treated as one huge space. But when you're working through the insulation and the DPM and everything else, we just wanted to treat each bay as its own thing, which worked far better. So here you can see all that insulation going in, and this was actually quite a rewarding stage. It was quite nice to get all those slotted in, and almost as quick as doing a smaller, more complicated room, less to cut around. It was at this point we realised just how big this building is, and just the amount of DPM we needed, the amount of insulation sheets, everything soon added up. And when you felt like you've achieved a certain phase of the build, you realise that you turn around and you've got another 3 or 4 times that to keep going on. So it was a little bit monotonous for a while, but we worked our way through it, and we had plenty of help. The girls all came out and we started getting down the membrane ahead of our concrete pour. Now, we had a few weeks notice before we booked in the concrete. However, it still had the pressure on to get all of our underfloor heating installed. We had Jason, an old plumber friend, come up from near our old house to help us on that. We also had to get all of the steel reinforcing in, which probably we had really underestimated on that, how much time that would take. But as you've guess, you do one bay and you get the hang of it, and then you really can push on and get a lot of it done in a fairly decent time. Our final bit of structural work before we could finish off that floor insulation was the front goalpost that sits over our front door, and we left that out just for access. We've been able to get the forklift in and out and things like that until that point, but once that was in, that was it. We were kind of all closed in as far as the structure goes, and that was it. No more vehicles in the barn, hopefully ever. And here they are, those big sheets of rebar. They weren't the heaviest, they weren't as heavy as the stuff we had to use in the pool, but they're not the light stuff either, so a little bit clumsy to get them in. We used plastic spacers. They were no good, even though we had to buy loads of them. Definitely go with the concrete chairs, or in our case we used some concrete commons. Well, it was just trial and error, but once we worked it out, we got there in the end. We had to do different heights over all of our expansion joint cuts, and we had to make sure there was conduit in the underfloor heating where it travelled through those joints. But here it is. Here is pour day, 1 day, and 600 odd square meters of concrete, and a team of very hard working people who were able to get all of this concrete down and get it to the point where we could get all of our dry shake, which is the colour and the hardener that we were putting on the top, down before we could power float it, or they could power float it late in the evening to give us that smooth finish ahead of our polishing that we're going to be doing in a few months' time. So it was great to see a proper team on site knowing what they're doing, and I would say stand back and watch, but no, we were pretty stuck in, because whether it was moving that huge concrete hose around, or whether it was getting ready ahead of putting a good ton or ton and a half of the dry shake down, we took that on as our responsibility on the day, and it was something that we wanted to try. We definitely didn't want just a cold bluey concrete, grey concrete. We wanted more of a sandy colour, so we were applying that as they were floating the floor. And yes, we didn't get it perfect. There was a little bit of hit and miss as far as the finish went, but we're really pleased overall with how it went, and it's saved us so much money out of our budget, where we don't need to worry now about all that tiling or other floor finishes. It did, however, leave us with plenty of work to do within the next 24 hours, and one of those was to cut all of our expansion joints, or control cuts I should say, into our slab to make sure that we don't have any stray cracks, hopefully, over our floor. November came, and this is the exciting bit. Tom's been with us for probably 8 months at this point and barely picked up a hammer or a piece of wood. And finally, we've got timber on site. We teamed up with James Jones and Sons, who we were really fortunate to bring on board as like a sponsor, and using their products throughout this part of the project, using their solid joists and also glulam engineered beams, and predominantly for our walls and floors, their I-joists. And the I-joist just gives us so much room for insulation. All of the cellulose, it's a recycled paper-based insulation that gets blown in there, 300 mil deep, and it's going to give us some really nice, thick, thermally acoustic, and just a nice bit of thermal mass to what is a quite lightweight construction technique. And this was just another really rewarding part of the build. Yes, it wasn't straightforward. We haven't got nice square top plates or anything like that. We're working with an old wonky cowshed, but we were able to get these huge walls constructed and put together in less than a day and see some real obvious progress. Being above ground is so nice. I'm so glad to see the back of Groundworks for now. We've still got plenty of drainage to get done. We were able to get that horizontal steel in on a weekend. Dave came up and we finished that last bit. It needed plating and bolting, and that meant we could put in some of these columns. We built these engineered sort of sandwiched columns out of glulam and insulation. They would sit between our glazing panels up on that north end, and once those were in, we were at actually the point where we can hand over to our window supplier, Eco House, to come in, and they could use their surveyor to come in and measure the actual openings and not rely on earths or plans or drawings. And that took some of the guesswork, well, a lot of the guesswork out of all that. And then of course we could get some of the boards up. Now going into, we don't like to set ourselves deadlines because life's stressful enough as it is, but it was nice to know that going into Christmas and New Year that we were almost weather tight. We could get those external breather boards up, then we could install this breathable membrane on the outside, and 80%, 90% we were dry. We can't go into 2025 without saying a huge thank you to everyone for supporting us on our charity fundraiser. Eden came up with the idea that we'd drag the whole family along the whole of the Malvern Hills, and believe it or not, we raised, I think, £3,000, over £3,000 for children in need. So thank you to everyone who got involved in that. It was amazing for us as a family, but also just great to see what good can come out of a YouTube community. Well, Happy New Year, everyone. Guess what? We're still building walls. There was a lot more than we thought, and as we worked our way through the building, we got a bit of a rhythm going, but no opening, no angle, nothing was quite the same. There was a lot of bespoke joinery going on here with these I-joists, but it was still nice that we could manage most of it, just the two of us. And of course our concrete is cured. It's been down for a month or two now, and we started having to reveal areas of it just so we could work around it and clear sections. And that was quite rewarding to peel it back and see the nice smooth finish. But these last few walls are they're our internal external walls, so they sit underneath the roof in the dry, but they're actually thermally going to be our external walls. So the garden room sits in sort of an ambient part of the house. It's going to be a bit like a conservatory, a orangery type area to lengthen the seasons. January also saw our new calf born on the farm, which was a nice little evening interlude from the build. So we were waiting all Christmas for our cow Hyssop to give birth, and here she is with her new calf. Little girl, and that means we had milk for the family and milk for the calf and zoomies, lots of calf zoomies to keep an eye on. As we moved into the end of January, we were able to get the last of the boards up around the garden room and also make a start on installing some of that OSB. Now that green OSB seems to be our theme colour throughout the build, and well, it's an important aspect of the build because it's all about the airtightness, while this brown breather board on the outside, which is a wood fibre board, is all about letting air and vapour transfer through it because it's keeping our walls dry. The green is all about being our airtight and vapor tight barrier. That sits on the inside face of all of our external walls, and that's an important part because we're going for a really high performing airtightness on this house. That's what's going to give us our main efficiency as well as the insulation. and there's a lot of detailing in that. So whether it's using these boards or the tapes and sealants that come with it, that's what we had to spend a lot of time and effort doing. It's not the most glamorous part of the build, but in the long run, it's those sort of details which are going to mean that, well, we can afford to live in the house, I hope. February came and we realised that there's certain bits we had to carry on and do, so that was another wall around the pool corner, which did mean that we could kind of cordon off and shut off that part from outside, which was quite nice to get the wall finished all the way around the building. And then a new delivery, a delivery of all that timber that we're going to need for our walls and floors. And another interlude, well, all the pigs decided to farrow on the same week, so we had piglets just about everywhere, which was great fun. And you can't beat piglets for snuggles. Good time wasters. It's like, well, it beats a fish tank, put it that way. Back to more important things, and those walls are going up, and these are not big chunky walls. These are nice sensible walls that are going to carry our first floor, and indeed some steel beams, which mean that we can keep that roof load distributed down onto our footings, but also give us that support needed for all the joists for our mezzanine. So with that in place, we can, well, it was quite nice. It was a solid week of just hanging joists, and before we knew it, we had a first floor, albeit without the floorboards. And this, again, was one of those things where nothing was quite regular, and it was a case of measure and cut and fit, and then measure and cut and fit. And it was nice to do. There's definitely something nice about working with someone like-minded, and when you get into that rhythm and you know what each other are doing, you can soon rattle through a job like this and get it all done, and look back at the end of the day and realize you can actually achieve quite a bit just when you get your head down and get stuck in. But like the groundwork, like the insulation, like the concrete, when you've done one bay, it's not over. You've got to keep going. So as we worked through the building, we got it a little bit better as we went and a little bit more efficient as we went, and we soon reached the far end. We switched over to solid joists for our ceiling joists and some of the loft areas, and that was a chance for us to start looking at some of the C16 homegrown UK timber, and we're going to be doing some videos on some of the comparisons and some of the feedback that we found after, getting through all these timber options throughout the build. Come March, and it's time for another unsung hero, which is Dad, who has also been a weekly visitor, often coming up on a Thursday giving me a hand on the build. So we started on the flooring upstairs, and over the course of a week or two we managed to get down the majority of it. There's still a good 40 or 50 boards to get done, but that was a nice moment because we got to start feeling what the upstairs space was going to be like, what the ceiling heights and the windows positioning and things like that were going to be like for us when we start getting these stud walls up. And we worked through all of that, and obviously we were using all the glues and screws and everything we needed in order to get that nice and solid for our floor. And almost 12 months into our build, we're getting ready for windows and doors and ready to take this building somewhere closer to being home. And it's only now, when we look back over the past 12 months, we realise that all of that stress and all of those stages which just seemed so daunting at the time are just merely stepping stones from transforming this old unused cowshed into our dream family home. And dream home is somewhat different now than it might have been 5-10 years ago. Requirements have changed. We've got a growing family, we've got 4 wonderful children, and we want this to be where they grow up and where they call home. And that's not just our immediate family. We want to open this home up to friends and family and neighbours and community, and be able to host events like we once did at our old house with our church and youth groups and all sorts of other ways that we could make this house and share this house with others. The downstairs bedroom and self-contained annex is somewhere where friends and family can visit and stay, but also somewhere where relations might need to stay on a longer basis, or even have a live-in carer, or when Joe and I are grey and old, somewhere where the kids can kick us out to. We've allowed upstairs space and bedrooms so that if we choose to foster again and welcome other children into this home, we've got the facilities to do that. We've got our small businesses that we need to be able to run efficiently from home. We've got the farm to manage, of course, YouTube videos to edit and keep all of that in one place. We've got homeschooling to think about. We've got self-sufficiency, all the produce that we have on the farm and all that sort of good stuff that needs to happen, and the walk-in pantries and larders and storage. There's just so much thought that had to go into making this house tick as many boxes as possible. And one of the things that keeps this all moving along is you guys tuning in every week and watching all these videos. Thank you so much for your support, comments and advice over the past 12 months. In fact, the last 12 years. It's been a fun journey. We're not stopping anytime soon. So we're going to keep pushing out these videos. We're going to keep sharing the dream with you guys and hopefully inspire you to take on some form of project yourself. But all that's left to say is to remember, if you can, do it yourself, and we'll see you next time.